Good afternoon, and thank you so much. It is really a great pleasure for me to be here today and have the opportunity to discuss such an important topic with tremendous panelist speakers. So, to not lose time anymore, I will start by setting the context. This year, we marked several important milestones when it comes to gender equality and women's empowerment. For example, the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Beijing Platform for Action. And in many ways, 2020 was supposed to be a year of transformation, a year of gender equality, calling for fulfillment of women's rights for an equal future. However, to this day, across the world, unfortunately, women continue to face gender-based discrimination, violence, lack of social protection in jobs or no jobs, and limited decent jobs for sure. Globally, as we know, only 4 out of 10 women participate in the labor market, where they make 77 cents for every dollar earned by men for jobs of equal value. Meanwhile, women carry out at least 2.5 times more unpaid care work and are overrepresented in informal economy, where they might be subjected to exploitation and abuse. There are estimations out there for a number of years now that if we are to go in the same pace following these trends of development, the overall global gender gap can only close in 100 years. For some regions, this is even more concerning. It's up to 264 years, if I remember correctly. To make things even worse then, this year in 2020, as we embarked into this new year, the COVID-19 pandemic unfolded and put gains achieved over the last decades when it comes to gender equality at a high risk. The pandemic found persistent gender gaps, and it further deepened the pre-existing and compounded inequalities, exposing more vulnerabilities in social, political, and economic spheres. Many outlooks anticipate severe economic crisis, loss of jobs, negative growth of GDP, and reversal in overall human development. So in the middle of the crisis, as we all know and have witnessed, women were at the forefront, be it as healthcare providers, workers, teachers, but also back at home, performing the majority of even rising amount of paid and unpaid care work. So critically, women's employment and income generations have been very much affected, much more, or let's say disproportionately when it comes to men, for a number of reasons, and some of it being that women tend to work in occupations that are, let's say, less commutable and are overrepresented in high-risk sectors that have been affected more by the pandemic. However, as we all know, every crisis brings new opportunities, and now we have a chance to see what these opportunities are and try to build that better. So what do we know? We know that we know that when there is gender equality in the labor markets, there is higher economic growth. There is research out there that supports this argument. We also know that the private sector companies grow more when there is diversity in talents and skills, equal remuneration for women and men in teams at all levels. For example, companies with at least one female director have better share price performance and return on equity, or having at least 30% of women in leadership positions added about 6% to net profit margin, or diverse publicly traded companies are 70% more likely to capture new markets and about 45% more likely to improve market share. These are old data and statistics that are in the reports out there. So yes, while businesses are increasingly conscious and action-oriented towards addressing gender equality and diversity issues, not many or not enough companies are actually taking concrete actions into supporting or progressing the Sustainable Development Goal number 5, which is about women and girls and gender equality in general. And this is why UN Women, together with UN Global Compact, back in 2010, have developed what we call the Women's Empowerment Principles, the WEPs, which are step-by-step principles that offer businesses holistic solutions to tackle gender diversity issues and lead to a better response to gender diverse market demands. So what is it that needs to be done to capitalize on these positive evidence that exists in order to narrow the gender gap? This is why today we're here discussing about gender balance, particularly in the construction sector. through our discussion today, we will try to unfold and point out what the key issues are and the underlying factors for the gender gap. But also, more importantly, we want the discussion to be forward-looking so we can derive concrete recommendations and actions needed to be taken in order to narrow this gender gap. So this brings me to the first question, and I would like to hear from Raeda. When you think, of course, about any male-dominated industry, construction is probably the first job that comes to mind, right? Around the world, the statistics, as I said, may be slightly different. However, overall, the share of women in the sector is relatively low. Could you please share with us, what do you think are the underlying factors for such a huge gender gap in the sector?
Thank you, Yllka. Great introduction. I want to add one point. If women are fully utilized at the workplace, by 2025, the world will see an additional GDP of $12 trillion. That's massive improvement in economies around the world. If we take male-dominated sectors like the construction industry, I used to work in the engineering construction sector for about 5 years. And you can see most of the women are actually at low-end jobs. Very few actually get technical jobs or move to management positions. I think part of it is that notion or the perception that it's a difficult sector for women. And I had those conversations, personally, I had those conversations where, I was told at some point, why would you want to do this? This is, you stay here, don't travel, don't go to the sites that we work on. And it was quite an eye-opener for me because, having done a lot of work outside to support women in senior positions, for me, that was a big thing. And I think the lack of an internal voice to support females at the workplace, the lack of policies that actually attract women, and not just only attract them, retain them, develop them, and promote them into senior positions, and the lack of the voice from the top and the culture that is needed. Most companies don't lack the intention, and this is really important. I've worked with a lot of companies, and everybody wants to create a more diverse and more, gender balanced workplace, but it's not enough. You have to tackle it from an ecosystem perspective. It's policies. Usually, companies give diversity to HR. HR is good, but it's not enough. It's policies plus culture plus training plus conscious efforts to actually support the increase of women in the sector. Also, there is the perception of that sector externally. So companies need to know in construction, they need to understand that there is a need for the change of perception for women who are entering this sector. So for a lot of women that I actually mentor or I talk to early on in their career, they are very smart and they look at where they're going to go in 5 to 10 years. And in the construction sector, this is not clear. So literally, the companies working in this field needs to be much more, let's say, clear about how they're going to help women who join their companies to actually train them, promote them, and retain them so they don't leave. In this pandemic, I think you've touched on a very important point. This is the time where companies can make change. Sometimes the change is very hard, it takes time. But when we are under this challenge of having to work remotely, having to retain our talent, it's really important to take this time. A lot of companies have actually used it to bring not only policies that cater for women, but also for the family. So we have to think about it also from a family perspective. The sector actually is not only about, also the construction sector is not only about talent, lack of talent, it's about lack of females going into engineering sectors as well. So STEM or STEAM disciplines are really critical right now. Companies are putting a lot of effort to help girls understand early on in their education career that they need to actually look at subjects like engineering to be able to join the sector. In general, there's a lack of engineers all over the world, be it male or female, but actually within the female population, it's even much, much harder.
And I'm actually going to sort of broaden the topic here and talk not just about construction industry, but about the general property industry. The reason I'm going to talk about that, if it's okay with you, is that the property industry here in Australia and the construction industry here in Australia really are kind of similar, same as one, and we do take the diversity, gender diversity piece fairly seriously. There's a report that was issued about 2 years ago here in Australia, and that identified sort of the three key areas of why I suppose gender issues exist in the industry, and that is really the boys' club mentality, pay equality, and the lack of diversity in senior leadership, all are seen as those kind of three key barriers for women being promoted, and the lack of, I suppose, of the promotion of women within the industry. So that's probably a key stat that's probably quite useful for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And particularly, I liked the way you said it. It's not enough. Yes, there is more and more conscious and more action being taken. Yet it is not enough. And true, as you said, there's several underlying issues that you already mentioned. And I would like to hear from Noorah as well. I mean, it is evident that in companies, some of the companies perform obviously better than others when it comes to gender equality. And also we often tend to end up in a debate with CEOs or other executives saying that, oh, in our company, everything is fine. We have 50% when it comes to women and men working in our company. We provide equal opportunities. But once you dig a little bit and look a little bit into it, then you realize that actually the gender equality horizontally at different levels is definitely is not the same. Or let's say there is no gender equality at different levels. So I'm wondering whether the situation is the same in the construction industry. And can you share from your own experience, perhaps, how do you see this? How have you seen this and entering in the job, but also remaining or even returning for women that want to come back after maternity leave? What is the path, and especially the career growth per se? If you can share with us, Noorah.
Sure. Thanks, Yllka. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Noorah. Actually, I'm working now as a project engineer in KBR MCD company based in Khobar, which is a collaboration between Saudi company and also American company. So talking a little bit about gender equality in private sector specifically, because my most experience in private sector, we encourage all of the stakeholders in private sector to take it as a value or as a culture in their companies. Not just only to put it as a posters or to put it, in their media. They need really to take it as a value and also, provide a concrete for this. Now, talking personally for my story, I found the private sector here in Saudi Arabia is really supportive for female, specifically engineers. They are putting us in the front line. They are encouraging us to involve in the meetings. Also, they are encouraging us to take a decision, making us a decision maker in some issues or concerns. Also, they sent us to the site visits. For me personally, I've done like for more than 8 or 9 site visits, which is far away from my let's say home country. And also they sent us for the education outside Saudi Arabia to support us, to provide us with the training, so working on the basics for having gender equality in their culture by, putting the female or male engineers in the front line, having them as a big part of the decision making, and also supporting them and sending them for the training. So the path for us as engineers is so clear. So this is much important than, just saying the words or having this in the posters. So now talking about the gender equality, I see it in Saudi Arabia in a private sector much more better than government sector. But our government and our cases here in Saudi Arabia getting better day by day and also year by year. So hopefully by 2030 we can raise the percentage or the progress of having female engineers participating in the construction field up to 25% by 2030, hopefully.
That does sound very good. I mean, definitely these kind of companies that support women in workplace, but also their career growth is definitely commendable and hopefully an example for others to follow. But I would like to also link here with the company policies as we were talking about, one of the issues that women face, or women-owned businesses as well, is when it comes to their opportunity to basically benefit from different contracts or tenders that are out there. So procurement, as we know, is a very powerful tool when it comes to women having the opportunity to grow their businesses, but also then, of course, employ other women and men, obviously. So I was wondering, in your opinion, what is it that should be done to increase the share of women that receive from procurement contracts from larger businesses? I mean, globally, I think it's women receive less than 1% of spending of large businesses and suppliers. So what would be the steps you think that should change? And this goes, sorry, I'm going back to Noorah again and then back to Raeda.
Sure. Now, I'm not that much in a procurement level, but I may give some hints based on the conversation I've had with the procurement, responsible persons there. They may have gained some skills in this field. So we may support women by getting them, participation, or by getting them training how do they negotiate or how do they present themselves on procurement level. And also working on their network. Network is something basic and those, in those levels when talking about the procurement or the supply chain. So when having a very good and a very maintained or continuous network and also a good network, this is something good also for them. And also supporting them financially. So when they get, the financial support from the government, from the big names of banks in their local or also international banks, that may, give them a much better shape in this procurement, field.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Noorah. Raeda, you want to add something, I see.
Yeah, I think this is a very valid question, and we're seeing more companies actually embed policies and put a quota or a percentage for procurement going to women-only owned businesses. So one of the things that helped this actually move forward is a lot of companies now, especially publicly listed companies who have major investors. Investment companies now are applying ESG standards and are looking at gender policies within the companies they invest. They're actually using proxy voting against companies that have no women on boards or show no signs of improving the number of women on boards or in senior positions and across the entire value chain of their business, meaning internally and across the supply chain. So we're seeing a really strong financial importance that companies now are using that to actually gain more investment from major investment companies. I've seen a lot of companies that they're reaching to women-only businesses in this region. I know in Saudi this is also being tackled at the highest levels. Here in the UAE is the same thing. We work through the 30% Club. We work with Abu Dhabi Global Markets. We work with a lot of institutional investors, and we're seeing this happen, and the change is taking place. It's slowly. But again, it goes back to the culture and the voice from the top at the organization, at the private sector. Really, it is something that's driven by the very top, by creating a culture that supports diversity in general, gender diversity specifically, not within the company, but also externally through their supply chain. So I think it's more about educating and more about, talking to the right people who make these decisions. Most often, the middle management, they're really good at applying these policies, but if it's not driven by a very strong voice from the very top, it doesn't happen. Johnson & Johnson, actually now they have in their procurement strategy, actually assign a percentage of their procurement to women-owned businesses. And this is trickling from the US headquarters down to every Johnson & Johnson operation across the world. A lot of companies are doing the same. So it's a matter of actually keeping an eye on what really moves the needle when it comes to empowering women from an economic perspective.
What does your company do to remove harmful gender-based stereotypes in media and advertising?
Oh, look, Knight Frank's is fairly proactive, and absolutely as we should be. Our CEO is in Australia. He's part of a broader group of called the Property Male Champions of Change, which are basically CEOs from all the male CEOs of major property firms, and they meet and they have an agenda and a task force and accountabilities which they have to attend to. I suppose, look, zero tolerance against those offensive comments and downplaying, people is kind of obviously not tolerated. We have some really great rules around how we, I suppose, attend to our daily tasks. For example, there is absolutely no panel that we will sit on as a business unless there is an equal male-female representation. We obviously, when we're looking at talent, which is really super important, we're encouraged to look outside of the typical talent pool of a role and understand that talent can come from many different places, not just the technical background of the skill set that you're looking for. And that certainly does open your opportunity to, inviting some really good diversity of thought into the matter. And just, calling out bad behaviours as a leadership group, particularly, there's an expectation and an absolute accountability that you must act in a certain manner, and if you don't, then there is outcomes for that. It's about calling out those bad behaviours and creating a safe environment to make sure that happens.
Thank, very, very straightforward and to the point. You picked up on some of good practices out there that we are hoping to be followed actually by other companies as well. And Noorah, as you said, there are a number of things that can be done when it comes to women basically growing as businesses more. You mentioned networking, which definitely nowadays is a very important area that needs investment when it comes to being in let's say the business world. All right, so as we mentioned in the beginning, the situation was not so let's say good before COVID started. Nonetheless, it was even worse this year when COVID started. So in addition to having an economic impact when it comes to jobs, women also ended up being victims and survivors of hugely increased domestic violence. We also mentioned that earlier in your discussion, you mentioned that education is one of crucial, let's say, determinants when it comes to women entering and remaining in the labor market. And here we are talking about STEM education. But in addition to this, and in addition to the work experience and the skills that women should have, there is one thing also that we need to be aware of, as we discussed earlier. It is the duty that has increased among women, the duty of care, of unpaid care at home, and not only for women, but more so for women than for men. Obviously, when a day is only 24 hours, so there is only a number of hours that is available to be set aside for care, and then hours to be put into the labor market. So in your view, in the construction sector, I assume, but I wanted to hear from you, is this also an issue? And then how is this linked to the changes that the COVID has brought to us? Of course, we've been talking a lot about the future of work. COVID-19 made sure that the future of work came today, in the sense that technology and innovation is at the core of all the rising industries, including construction. So how do you see the two linked together, the care economy, the flexible working arrangements, the technology and innovation? And does this whole puzzle basically provide a brighter future when it comes to women in the labor market, or an additional barrier?
So this is a great point, because we've seen in the past few years, a lot of the consulting firms have talked about the future of talent and how talent in 20 years, back 3 years ago, talent in the next 10 years will be a commodity rather than, you having a job. You will actually be working with 2-3 companies at the same time at your own pace that's how talent is going to be managed. What is going on with COVID is actually accelerated that process. So accelerated the need for a proper IT infrastructure to allow for remote working, because simply everybody was quarantined at home at some point around the world. That's one thing. The other thing is the fact that our daily lives have changed. The burden has increased on parents and on moms as well, on mothers, working mothers. That actually required companies to look into more ways to support women and support parents in general. So flexible working hours have been introduced and working from home. In my previous company, so we're working in engineering sector, not in the construction sector. But I know even way before COVID, we had remote working for women. We had remote working. People were working from different states. They're working from all over the world. I currently in my job have 3 people that work remotely from their homes, and it's doing fine. So if the process and if the experience so far is good, it has to be amplified. The other thing is depends on the leaders within the organization. And I know in our organization, we have managers who are actually giving the flexibility for women, not only to work from home, but also to work on different hours. Because again, if you are catering to kids at school and you need to sit with them while they're doing their education online, you're not going to be able to actually focus on your work. Then probably you can do that at another time during the day. So we're seeing that come into place, but I think there is way more room to improve the job ecosystem in terms of flexibility for women and for everybody. Women usually cater for families, but there are employees who cater for parents as well, or family members who need constant support. So we need to take that into account. And there is that conversation. We're seeing a lot of companies who have issued policies around, supportive work policies, be it from home or flexible. I think this is where we're going. And in my opinion, if companies do not take this opportunity to transform the way they work with their employees, they're going to miss out. It's going to be simply like companies that did not ride the internet wave at the beginning. This used to exist, their business does not grow as such. This is another shift that we're seeing within the work ecosystem, not only in construction, but across all sectors.
And do you think there is more to be done when it comes to using these good practices and showing them off out there, for example, through marketing or other visibility and outreach? There is, of course, a lot of perception and in some parts of the world, discriminatory perception when it comes to the roles and responsibilities of women. And there is a need to break these social discriminatory social norms. Do you think there is room for private sector to intervene and do more in this sense?
Yes, I think, the private sector will lead this revolution. They have to talk about what works and what doesn't work. And I think sharing case studies and sharing success stories is one way to educate everybody. For women who, let's say you're in your mid-career and you're looking for a job and you have a family, you're definitely going to look at these elements right now. Can I work from home? Do I have flexibility? Do I have some time off to take care of my family? Is the company supportive enough to do this? Now, this is what the new trend in looking for new jobs is. I've heard a lot of women say, I'm going to go with this company. It's a bit lower pay, but at least I've got the flexibility to work from home and be there for my family when they need me. So these things are really important. If the company wants to be more diverse and provide equal opportunities for women and truly grow their female talent to reach the highest positions in their organization, they have to take a look at these. They have to make the education externally. They have to lobby for it if there is needs for lobbying, for example, within labor laws. All these things do happen, and we do have an experience in actually, changing that culture a bit. And I think it just takes a bit of more determination and a strength of character to actually go and talk about it externally. Even if there's small wins, small successes, I think that makes a big difference.
So to wrap it up, Noorah, I would like to hear from you then. What are the 3 key steps that need to be taken and by whom in order to narrow down the gender gap in construction sector in the next 5 years, let's say?
Okay, the first key should be started from us as a generation. So for female, engineers, they need to prove themselves. They need to commit to their works. and they also need to participate and show confidence in themselves. So we can show to the world that we can, do much better in the construction field. It's like a stereotype that this field is for men only, and the men can do much better than women, and they can handle the tough tasks, especially here in the construction field. So we need to prove ourselves. So the first and the important key here is starting from us as a generation. The second thing is to have a big eye on, as you said before, Yllka, the HR policies. So we need to have in every company like a small agency or maybe organization to inspect and to follow up if these policies are implemented very well. Because here in Saudi Arabia, our government is implementing a huge steps just to put the female, in the first row. So we need to make sure if these implementations or these steps are implemented very well, by the stakeholders or by the employers. So the second step, it should be taken from the responsible person in the company or the employers. The third factor is taking care of the media or advertising. So we are doing, as the female, huge steps in the construction field. So we need someone just to cover it, not just for show up, but we need to clarity, the vision. We need someone to just focus and put or shed a light on our achievements in this field. So it should, of course, it's going to be making a big difference if we are having those good and also the truth image in the construction field. And that's it.
Look, there's a couple of things that absolutely need to be do. There needs to be an increase in flexibility, and there needs to be a recognition, like I say, where the talent is and where the talent pool can be found. We need to be quite transparent about pay equality. That's a really huge issue, and that's certainly one of the barriers to getting women into lead and retaining, women in senior leadership positions. And also, it's about framework of support. Get yourself a great mentor. Is going to certainly someone who could support you and really champion you, so you're not just championing yourself, and that's really super important. So that's probably my three things.
What is it, if you want to add anything, what is it that you think are the key steps, steps that need to be taken, and by whom, in order to close or at least narrow down the gender gap in the construction sector in the next 5 years, Raeda?
Yeah, so we talked about it, and I think Noorah mentioned a few. Internally, I said at the beginning, HR is one component. It's not the solution. So it is the let's say the engine that creates the policies and monitors the implementation of the policies. This is really important. It is the work of several stakeholders internally. It's the top management, it is the HR, and it is the managers who manage big teams within the organization. There is need for more gender supportive policies. There is need for increased cultural sensitivity to the issue, increased training for employees on topics. And I know we spoke a lot, everybody speaks about unconscious biases, but these are things that we need to tackle. They're really important. The other thing that really is emerging, and we're working on it through the 30% Club, is the narrative around gender diversity. When we talk about women, people tend to say, okay, we know, we understand. But when you talk about actually having the talent base that supports the growth of your organization, that talks to your stakeholders, your customers, that talks to your investors, this is really important. They understand it from that perspective. And most importantly, is actually monitoring the KPIs around those policies. You put a policy, you put it there, you say, we have a policy, but are you monitoring the implementation? Are you reaching the KPIs that you want to? So if you put a KPI at the end of each fiscal year and actually monitor it, that's really important. Again, diversity should be managed by the very top management and not by HR. HR is the engine that supports, but the true direction and guidance comes from management.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Raeda, and thank you for pointing out the crucial areas to look into for us and hopefully for the audience that is listening to us out there. It has been really very much a pleasure for me to with the panelists, and we have heard the issues that are out there. We know and we knew about the issues, and I'm really happy that today we got into some of the recommendations, very concrete recommendations as to what needs to happen from the private sector itself. So yes, in addition to having access to education, in this sense, to technological areas of education, STEM education, there is a need for private sector to be even more conscious, but that is not enough, as Raeda said. We need them to take action into making this change happen. And these actions start from looking internally into their policies and practices that they have from HR policies when it comes to hiring and retention practices, but also other policies that are pertaining to the workplace. We said flexible working arrangements, for example, is one area that private sector nowadays they have to. It's a must that things need to change. COVID-19 brought this change as a must to us, and for us to be able to keep up, we need to make those changes. And also it was mentioned by Noorah and Andrea, I think earlier, that the career development and the private sector giving the opportunity to women for climbing up in the ladder is also very, very important. And in addition to all the cultural sensitivity work that needs to be done around this issue, and crucial above all is, of course, the monitoring. So one thing is to keep talking about, yes, we understand, and yes, we're making the changes, but unless you can show how these changes were made and what is exactly quantify the change that was done, then I don't think we can really say that we have done much change about it. So definitely policies is one thing, but having clear targets and also having clear KPIs that are easily measurable and monitored is definitely very crucial. And for this, I'm very happy, and I have to say again, I urge all the companies to visit webs.org. It is really an agenda and a platform for all businesses out there to really look into the issue and actions in different workplace, marketplace, and community areas of work on how to make gender equality and women empowerment better for all women and girls. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ooh, it's a big subject. It's a big subject, and I think it was interesting on some of the comments that were being made there. And Raeda, you mentioned about the policies. It's not just the policies; it's the attitude. But I think I'll kick off first of all with Yllka. Really, I mean, in terms of this meeting the challenges of the skills gap, recruiting women is clearly no longer it's just a nice thing to do, but it's a necessity. Why do you think that we're seeing such a major challenge in increasing women in the workplace, specifically perhaps within construction? And I'm sure it's prevalent within other areas as well. But what's the issues that we're facing with all this?
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot for the question. I mean, as you said, one of the key determinants for labor force participation for women is education, of course, and work experience. Now, in the region, for example, in Arab states, there has been tremendous progress when it comes to women's enrollment rates in education, but also in STEM education. So there's more and more women engineers out there. Yet again, the labor force participation hasn't really changed much in the past 10 years. So there is obviously something else which needs to be done in order to improve the situation. And of course, some of the issues are related to decent work, to the availability of decent work for women, and then also to other workplace issues. For example, there needs to be equal incentives from the labor market for both women and men. This is still not the case. We're talking still about a huge disparity when it comes to pay gap, gender pay gap. There needs to be equality when it comes to career development. There needs to be opportunities for training, opportunities for professional development within the companies. Also, very important, it's the unpaid care that we touched a little bit upon in the conversation. The burden falls on women. And if there's no sharing of this burden, there is no work hours within the day that women can't put in the labor market. And then everything, of course, links in the end to other workplace policies that were mentioned today, like flexible working arrangements, For example, especially we have seen this as very crucial with COVID. And lastly, I would think that steps need to be taken forward, changing also discrimination and harassment. So there should be workplaces free of discrimination and harassment for women to find it attractive to be in the private sector, in this case, in the construction sector as well. I think we mentioned also the technology, but I'll briefly say technology is changing everything, and it also changing when it comes to the skills gap. What used to be difficult to narrow down the gender gap, I think it's becoming easier and easier because technology has changed everything. It's changing careers, it's changing the way we work, it's changing from where we work, it's changing the sectors, the industries we're working in. And I think despite the COVID-19 having very negative implications in everybody's life, there are clearly opportunities that came out there to show that more and more women will be coming into the labor market, into the labor force, as this technological talent is becoming more and more needed for workplaces.
I think as we've been talking all the way through, this is a significant culture change for everyone that has to start and needs to continue. And I think that Raeda mentioned some important points in the discussion that we're having, certainly from your experience in terms of working within a construction environment. What is it that we need to do in terms of changing from the grassroots, in terms of changing these mindsets and challenging these bias and these stereotypes, Raeda?
Thank you, Peter. I think you said a very crucial word. It's challenging. Oftentimes people know what the right thing to do, but not necessarily act on it. I think it's individually in organization. I've been one of those people, but there's a lot of people who just champion the issue of diversity within the construction sector. People who have experience and authority can be not only mentors, but sponsors. Sponsorship is really important to actually help women network within the organization, ensure that their achievements, their skill sets, their unique attributes are well communicated to people who make decisions in terms of promotion or given stretch assignments or being asked to serve or work on special projects. I think giving that opportunity, availing the network to women within the company is one way to go about it. If we want to change it from the grassroots level, it takes some bold action to make that happen in organizations. Also women, and following on what Yllka mentioned in terms of technology, women who really empower themselves with skill sets that are more suited to our ever-changing technology landscape, especially within the construction. We see a lot of data-driven solutions within construction. AI, machine learning, and deep learning are becoming part of the industry as well. So, and the opportunity to learn is actually out there. You've got various platforms that are almost cheap, like Coursera, edX, that provide courses from really reputable institutions in these fields, and women who actually get ahead of the curve by on these new sets of skills really do set themselves apart within the labor force. I think from the grassroots level, and we've failed to mention that there is an element to the entire gender diversity within the sector that comes from society and from family. And I've talked to girls in school who told me that their parents told them engineering is not for girls, it's not a career for women. And in this day and age, I found that to be extremely astonishing, because I think if anything, the family unit is really where it helps a woman shape her own perception of the career in engineering and in construction in general.
I think it's you make a really good point there, and I guess that some of this is about culture, and both yourself and Noorah have proved completely different in that regard in terms of what they should be pursuing a career of, and congratulations. And I wish I was working next to you two for sure. It'd be really great. I mean, Noorah, can I just ask you a question? I mean, from your point of view, what do you think are the key factors that are affecting this gender pay gap that we see? What do you think are the factors that are causing issues in that?
Yeah, so now our target is to minimize or to eliminate as much as we can the gender gap in construction field specifically. So there is many factors that we need to be need to be taken in this just to to achieve this target. So now the first factor it should be from us as a generation. So we need to prove ourselves. So it's going to be started from the culture, as Raeda said, or from the family environment. So we need to learn our you know, kids, or our, especially the female, that they need, but they can't do anything that men can do it, you know, especially in the construction field. It's a huge field. It's like, you know, a men-driven field with the whole, you know, tasks and tough tasks. So it's going to be started from our family, or from our, you know, our houses. So we need to learn them those steps. And for us as a generation, we need to prove ourselves. We need to show that we are committed to those tasks and we can do it, specifically in this field. And also another factor should be taken from the employer themselves. So we need to have a much more flexible, you know, procedures or policies, for example, on site daycare, or having, you know, working from home flexibility environment. So that makes us more comfortable working in this field. And also another factor, it's having all these, you know, achievements on all these tremendous, you know, achievements in this field covered by social media or by media in general. So if we have it, you know, covered in a very truth way, we can support women to more engage, more participate in this field.
Yeah, great, and thank you for that. I think that, I mean, I'd love to just throw out to the panel really to ask you from your experiences, each of you, really just as a quick soundbite before we finish this session, is really, what advice would you give to young women who are coming into the construction industry or are thinking to come into it?
Yeah, just to have them, you know, be confident. We can do it, you know, very well. We have now a huge steps have been done in the past years, especially from the government here in Saudi Arabia and in general, you know, for the world. So we just need to be confident. We just need to commit to our target, to our goals to be achieved, and just, you know, to work closely with our management, with the high top management in this field. So a huge steps can be done, just showing the confidence in this field, and we can do much more.
Yeah, excellent, thank you. And Raeda, from your point of view, just briefly, what would you say is the advice that you would offer up?
Well, I think one advice is always ask to be assigned to projects, special projects, ask for a promotion, ask to be given a challenge. I think women tend to refrain from asking or putting themselves forward. Usually women, research shows, they only present themselves when they feel they're 100% equipped to do a task or a job, as opposed to men who are more risk takers. So I think take the risk and ask. There is no harm in asking, and be forgiving to yourself, because sometimes we do make mistakes, and it's fine. It's a learning opportunity. Don't let that deter you from going forward. So I think ask and never fear to make any mistakes.
That's great, thanks, Raeda. And Yllka, from your point of view, what would be your parting comment on that note?
Well, I guess educate yourselves, be informed, get as much as you can, and perseverance. Don't stop. Just make it happen, and you can make it happen. There's a lot of good examples out there nowadays, and it's not so difficult with the technology to follow and learn. So yeah, but definitely the point number one would be educate yourselves.
I think that's great. I think for me, listening to the panel discussion earlier on, for me personally, that's been an absolute education. And, you know, I thank you for your time and for the contributions that you made. It's been extremely interesting listening to these perspectives. So so thank you very much indeed, and much appreciated. So once again, thanks for your time.